Here's a question for you. Have you ever had a director or a teacher tell you to slow down? Maybe it's something like, watch your pacing, or don't rush it. If you have, you've probably been annoyed or frustrating at the note because to you, it was fine. It didn't need adjustment. Or better still, exactly how are you supposed to slow down without it being an exercise in mechanics? A switch you can just click and wham, you've slowed down the dialogue. It is such a common request by directors and acting teachers that many actors, they simply ignore the note because they are not sure how to implement it. We'll dive into this subject so that it turns into a change of pace. I'm Jeffrey Dreisbach. This is Casting Actors Cast.
It's time for another episode of Casting Actors Cast, insights for actors from a casting director. Here he is, your host, Jeffrey Dreisbach.
Well, hello and welcome to Casting Actors Cast. As I mentioned, my name is Jeffrey Dreisbach. I'm a casting partner with McCorkle Casting in New York. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hey, listen, if you haven't checked out the website of the podcast, I encourage you to do so. You simply go to castingactorscast.com. That's castingactorscast, all one word.com. There's a form on the landing page that says dive into the talent pool. And when you do that, that's going to open up some freebies for you. And I mean free. One is a video, Casting Secrets. That's the name. That's the name of it. Casting Secrets, what they don't tell you. But I'm going to tell you in this free 20-minute video all about behind the scenes stuff in terms of casting. I think you'll find it really useful. Also, there's a book that you can download. It's absolutely free. It's 100 pages. It's a PDF, so you can put it on your reader and take a look at it that way. You can print it out if you want to. But it is a fully published book called Conversation Pieces Out of the Studio, the voiceover workshop for professional actors. It's just my gift to you for filling out that form that says dive into the talent pool. It gives me your name and your email address. I don't do anything with that other than I might on occasion send out an email blast to all of those people who've signed up, just letting them know about an upcoming episode or something like that. I promise you I don't spam you. I don't waste up any of your bandwidth. And finally, here's my shout out to my good friends at actorsconnection.com/New York, online programming with professionals in the industry. Need I say more? Check it out. actorsconnection.com/New York. All right, let's just dive into the subject that we have decided to do today in defining pace. Now, I'm one of those people, if you haven't... If you've been a regular listener of the podcast, you know that I talk really, really fast, that I have all this excess energy all the time, that I drink more caffeine than God ever intended a human being take. But that's me. And I know that as an actor, I got pace notes quite frequently. And so this is kind of my wheelhouse. And now here I am, not only as a casting director, but I also do a tremendous amount of teaching because I love to teach. I love to give back what wasn't given to me by doing the podcast as well as teaching classes. And so pace is one of those notes that I always have difficulty giving to actors so that it makes sense, so that it doesn't become annoying. And more importantly, how do you implement adjusting the pace? Knowing how to do it is one thing, but then understanding how you do it in the character is another. So we're going to dive into this a little bit more deeply, I hope. But first, let's define what I mean when I'm talking about pace. Well, we can really make it simple. Pace is defined as the speed or the rate at which an actor speaks. So this pace or the speed at which the actor speaks. When I say actor, you know I'm talking about the actor in character speaks. So that's kind of the generic definition of pace. When given a pace note, it's just because you're going too fast, or the rate at which you're speaking is an unacceptable speed. Also, another kind of a reference to pace, it really does refer to a kind of a time allotment given for any specific task or enterprise. So it refers to a time allotment for a task or enterprise. You have to wrap this package, but you've got to do it within a certain period of time. And so when you have this much time to do this kind of task, there's always a tendency to rush it, to go beyond what is being asked for because you are under this kind of time pressure, this time commitment. Another way to define it, I think, is it's a manifestation of energy production. In other words, sometimes if you've got a lot of energy, it just translates itself into being a faster pace. Now, that is something that we have within our DNA sometimes. Natural energy production can really translate into just being faster. Part of that has to do with our brain being faster than our mouth. And so when we have this excess energy, sometimes that manifests itself into this very unnatural sounding pace when we are acting. So now, let's answer the question. What determines pace when acting out a character? So what are the factors that really give us our pace notes to ourselves when we're playing a role? Well, obviously, and I think the most common has to be actor nervousness. When the actor feels nervous, especially if it's like an audition or it's an opening night or, whatever the circumstance, when an actor is nervous, somehow that translates into the character's pace. Not that the character is necessarily nervous, but that nervousness can get translated into a pace that is, well, I don't want to say the word unnatural, but it doesn't seem to comport with the character. And that's because the actor's nervousness is the prevailing emotional track that the character is on at any given moment. Now, sometimes the pace is a character trait. Sometimes the actor decides, oh, my character talks fast, or my character has a lot of energy, and so therefore that will manifest itself into the character talking fast. Well, that's an acceptable thing, except if it's so fast that it kind of bulldozes over any choices or nuance that the character might need to express. The number 3 reason, loss of awareness. Sometimes we're just not aware of the objective of that particular scene. We're not aware of our purpose in that scene or that moment. We're not actually doing moment-to-moment acting. We're just deciding that it's just an exercise more than anything else. So we become unaware of exactly what our pace is. We sort of feel like we're just simply getting lost as opposed to getting lost in the moment. I hope you understand the difference. So now let's take a look at some tools to effective character pace. And the effective use of the character pace is really understanding what gear changes are all about. Now, I've used the term gear changes in a lot of podcasts recently, as well as if you go back, several podcasts, 100 podcasts ago, I'm talking about gear changes. So it might be a good idea to take a review and maybe listen to some of those past episodes. But having said that, gear changes literally are when the character has a change of thought, that something physical changes in the character. And so one of the gear changes are the pitch of our voice. I'm talking to you like this. Now I'm talking to you like this. So when I shift my pitch of my voice, I'm actually helping to understand the clarity of going from one thought to another. Another gear change is the pause. The use of the pause can have great dramatic effect. That you have a thought, and now you're not sure how you're going to express it. So when we have a pause, it really draws attention to the moment that character is experiencing some kind of delay, some kind of question about continuing. And then, of course, the pause is a great gear change. But in addition to that, pace is a huge gear change. I can talk to you at this pace because I've had a lot of caffeine today, but now I'm slowing down to make another point. So you see how pace can really, here's a good word, effectuate some character choices that are in the character. The other tool is that when you adjust the pace, know that energy and pace are not synonymous. Just because you have a lot of energy doesn't mean you have to go fast. That's another way of saying it. In fact, I'll go so far as to say when you want to emphasize something for dramatic effect, sometimes there's more power in slowing something down when you need to make a point. So be careful of using the character energy and also translating that into pace. They're not synonymous. Those are two different elements that should be kept separate. Number 3, it's really amazing that sometimes all the actor has to do is refocus on who the character is speaking to. When you can really put the energy into making sure you're making sense to the other in a scene or in a moment, then, of course, your pace will be perfect. Number 4, show awareness that you are speaking new information to the other. I guess the other way to say this is something I heard from a stage director several years ago, which is the audience is hearing this information for the first time. The audience is getting the information and getting the story, and so you have an obligation to make sure that the audience understands what you are saying. And the way that they understand what you are saying is to make sure you're not going too fast so that you miss salient points. Ooh, good word, salient. I think another note that I would love to give is many times actors will put themselves under this awareness of the dialogue, that they really have to kind of get through it, that they really don't understand that when you remove time from the dialogue, or the idea of you have this much time with this much dialogue, when you can just simply let the time element go from the dialogue, then your pace is going to be so much more viable and truthful. I do an exercise in my acting class that I'd like to share with you. And so we'll try this little experiment, see if this helps. But at the end of this podcast today, I would like you to imagine that I'm standing in the same room that you are in. Just imagine that I'm there. Now, I want you to verbally tell me how to get to the nearest 7-Eleven from where you are. Right? Everyone knows there's a 7-Eleven somewhere around where they live. If not, then make it another store. But I want a Slurpee. And so I want you to verbally tell me how to get to the nearest Slurpee verbally. Starting from when I walk outside your door, do I make a left or a right? By the way, I'm going to walk. Yes, I know it might take a really long time, but I need you to give me step-by-step instructions on how to get to the nearest 7-Eleven. When you do that, I want you to take particular attention to the fact that you are giving me these directions. That's the exercise. Now, you know what? When I do this in class, what's really hilarious is that the actor suddenly slows down. Suddenly they have to think of the exact directions, but they are also aware that they're providing the instructions to the other person in the room, i.e. me. And what happens is so magical because to a person, they're giving that information at a pace they know I can understand. It always works. And so if you think any dialogue you have is a way of providing instructions or directions, then you will always be giving the pace at an appropriate rate, at an appropriate gauge for the other. So now let's talk about translating pace notes into your work. When you translate pace notes, what I'm talking about is when you get a pace note, how do you process that pace note from a director or from a teacher? How does that work? How do you incorporate that on the fly when you are asked to slow it down? Number one, just remember to breathe. Yeah, simple breathing. Taking a nice, full, cleansing breath. So the literal breath is something that you just need to have a sense of control, I think, and regaining control. But here's the other thing. When I say take a breath, I am also talking about taking an emotional breath. Give yourself a moment to take a break from where your head is at. Take a mini microsecond vacation and just breathe and give yourself an emotional breath as well. That's going to really help a reset of your approach to the work. Second is when you're working with another person in a scene, make sure you're seeking out feedback from the other character, nonverbal feedback, as well as regular feedback. But when you really are listening, when you're really looking for them to understand you, your character, then you will not be aware of slowing down or speeding up. It will not be a conscious thing you're doing. It will be naturally incorporated into the relationship of the other. So seek out feedback, verbal and non, from the other. And that will also make an adjustment on the pace. I want you also to embrace how slowing your words can have a dramatic impact as part of your gear changes. Like I demonstrated earlier, slowing down makes emphasis. So your character might really need, in this emotionally charged moment, to be very meticulous with those words. And that is an adjustment in pace, as opposed to just yelling it out. So play around with some of those interpretive choices that are now at your disposal in the form of tools for pace. Additionally, I want you to make subtext a question that must be answered. Now, we all know subtext is what you are thinking while you are talking. I love the idea of subtext as it relates to pace, because if you ask the right question in your subtext, then you're seeking an answer rather than giving yourself a note. In other words, the subtext in a dialogue with another character might be, it's really important that I hope that they understand me. Do they really understand what I'm saying? If that's your subtext, notice how that adjusts your pace. So make the subtext a question that must be answered. Moving on from there, although pace is just one of many issues that can disrupt a performance flow or a rehearsal flow, it is simply that your brain is working overtime by being ahead of your thoughts and your emotions. So allow your pace to be incorporated into the full, rich texture of the entire character you are playing. After all, it's only a change of pace. I'm Jeffrey Dreisbach, and this is Casting Actors Cast.
Please don't forget to review, like, and share Casting Actors Cast wherever you get your podcast videos. Thanks. I'm Megan Grace Martinez.